Hello folks, the new store mount addition, the Trader's Gilded Brutosaur, was certainly a little controversial. But setting all that aside, one thing that is the case is that it is possible to get your hands on it just by playing the game. The secret, of course, is to use World of Warcraft tokens to buy Blizzard balance and spend that instead. At least in both the EU and the US, I'm not so sure about other regions, the mount will require 6 tokens for you to purchase it. Now the price of the token does change a fair bit, but at the time I checked it for this video, getting the mount would set you back almost 2 million gold in the EU and 1.5 in the US. That is for sure a hefty sum of gold, but when you compare it with the price of the original Brutosaur back in BFA, which was 5 million gold, it's arguably a bit of a steal. I've no doubt that plenty of folks did swipe their credit cards to get the mount, but at the same time, given the in-game auction house ran out of tokens, I also suspect that in-game gold was a major contributor to the sheer number of people who were able to get the mount in day one. The original Brutosaur was for me the trigger to get into gold making seriously. I was aware that it was a thing even before that, but I never really had much interest in putting in the time and effort to make serious gold until I saw that lovely auction house mount. The announcement that it was to be removed was the final thing that pushed me over the edge, and I managed to not only get the mount, but end BFA with 3.5 million gold. Not bad, given that I started that expansion with less than 100k. But we actually got quite a lot of notice for that Brutosaur's removal, and that's not something they have with this new mount, which is due to be removed on the 6th of January, which at the time this video goes live leaves you with just 56 days or 8 weeks to get the gold. What that means is that you're going to need to make around 187k a week in the US and 250 in the EU, or to put it another way, 27k a day in the US or 36k in the EU. Those numbers, by the way, are rounded up a lot, so do put those calculators away and stop checking my maths. Now, if you are someone who does not have a few million already, that may seem like quite the mountain to climb, and in all honesty, it is. But if you're willing to put in some serious time to getting the mount, it is nevertheless very doable. Right now, I can make around 20 to 25,000 an hour from what is quite inefficient gathering around the new zones. But I'm aware of people who, with a bit more focus in building things like speed sets or min-maxing their profession trees, who are able to get close to double that. Realistically, at those rates, you're going to be looking at having to spend about 10 to 12 hours a week on making gold, which is doable, but I suspect probably not the most riveting of fun for some people. But all of this assumes that you're up to date with your talent trees. If you're not, and we're trying to bring a new gatherer up, you'll probably be looking at only getting about 10 to 12k an hour at first, albeit that would improve over time. Now, 20 hours farming a week for 8 weeks. Yeah, I kind of thought you wouldn't fancy that. Fortunately, if you're not already set up to be able to make some serious gold, or that gathering and farming is not for you, there are still alternatives. And in fact, diversifying your gold making can actually be surprisingly effective, both in increasing your income, but also in just making it all be a bit more fun. So what are the available alternatives? Now, I'm going to assume that if you don't already have well over 1 million gold, you're probably not super up to date with all your professions. So I'm going to be concentrating on some of the more accessible options. Now, I've already mentioned gathering, that's herbing and mining, and that is a decently safe bet, albeit it is one that is very slow to get started in the current expansion until you gain some profession knowledge and get your skills up. But it's fortunately not the only option. There's also skinning, farming cloth, or meats for cooking. These options are generally more productive and faster at the beginning, but they also tend to be items that make you a lot less gold, and for that reason, these farms tend to be better done as group farms. The benefit of group farming is that the mobs are much faster to kill, and if you find an area which hyper spawns, and that basically means that the more players are in the area, the faster the NPCs will respawn. Farming is either a 5-man group or as a 2 times 4-man group can greatly increase yields. These farms are often listed in the custom group finder, so it's really not that hard to get started. It's also worth at this stage talking about older content. The older content market is surprisingly strong. There are always people looking to level up old professions, and crafting for transmogging old mounts is most definitely a big thing. In the past, it did require quite a bit of research, as some things sold more reliably than others, but ever since the launch of the region-wide auction house, pretty much all the major profession materials from older content now sell very quickly. At the start of an expansion, in my experience, current content materials do make more gold, whereas later on it kind of swaps round, as the older markets are often a lot more stable over time. Right now, current stuff is generally better if you've ranked up your professions, but there are a few exceptions. The new engineering mount has increased demand for a lot of older engineering and blacksmithing materials, including some ores, and quite a few of the older farms have jumped up a lot in value. Now, moving on to the crafting side, and if you're not already very deep into it, my own personal view is that the most accessible options for newer crafters is in raw material crafting. That is, for example, tailors can make cloth bolts, blacksmiths can make ingots, and basically those kind of things. Engineering also has a system called pilfering that can extract current content raw materials from some of the older materials, and this can be surprisingly lucrative, especially as it will generate some very rare parts for that new engineering mount. Unlike finished products like transmogging gear, materials are always in very high demand and sell well, and in most cases they do not require massive investments of time to get started. One potential gotcha is that the most valuable items when it comes to raw materials are often time gated in some way, which does limit their potential unless you decide to play the ace card of every crafter. That is, of course, your warband. With the new warband bank, it's easier than ever to use multiple alts to build a crafting empire, and for crafters, making serious gold does tend to require having multiple characters. Be it producing slow-selling finished products or dealing with time-gated materials, making serious gold from crafting, in my view, does need diversification. Basically, the more that you can list up in the auction house, the more sales you'll get. But if you list too much of the same thing, you can easily tank a market or just not find enough buyers to sell it in time. Now, I will say this again, that all sounds like a ton of work. And honestly, it is. I was not kidding about looking to spend up to 10 hours a week if you really want to get that 1.5 to 2 million gold in 8 weeks. So what would I do if I were trying to make gold on the clock, so to speak? I'd personally aim to have maybe 4 to 5 active characters. I'd have one major gatherer for when I just want to chill with a podcast, along with a set of crafters focused on selling raw materials and other basics like tailoring bags. For a daily routine, an hour of current content farming and an hour of crafting would probably do the trick, albeit it would be important to track your yields and potentially be willing to vary the relative time you spend as the markets change about. But what about some specifics? What markets and what items? Well, I'm personally not really wanting to go too much into any individual specifics, because the one sure thing is that the World of Warcraft market changes very quickly, and frankly, if an entire content creator's audience descends into that market, it will be completely tanked. But there are a bunch of tools to help you figure out what's right for you. The add-on Craft Sim is a must for crafters. It allows you to get a reasonably accurate handle on the cost of crafting items and their possible profits, which actually is quite hard to work out with the new profession system. Thanks to stats like multi-craft and resourcefulness, your yields and the mats that you need to make them are actually very variable. And Craft Sim is a great tool for estimating what they're likely to be as you increase the volumes that you produce. Another great tool is Worth It. This is a tool that can provide predicted gold per hour for a very wide range of farms based on the current auction house prices, helping you to spot new forming farms or perhaps ones that you're currently doing which are starting to deteriorate and it's time to give them a bit of a miss. And then of course there's the granddaddy of all, which is Trade Skill Master. There is no doubt that it does make bulk posting much easier. And if you want to make 1.5 million gold in 8 weeks, you're going to have to get used to bulk posting. TSM also has some very powerful tools for tracking market prices, which, as well as being a must to help you figure out how to price your items, is also needed to feed that pricing data into those other add-ons I mentioned, both of which rely on having accurate pricing data in order to make predictions for you. Tools like these really are game changers. Manually posting in the auction house is perfectly possible, but well, you just try posting 200 items by hand and see how long it takes. And so here's my main suggestion on how to get starting if you want to give it a go just now. Get yourself 4 to 5 characters. Make it one farming alt and the rest is crafters focused on those raw material crafting. Now, don't be afraid to start dipping into finished crafts as well as you start to rank those alts up. Focus mainly on current content. Spend perhaps about 75 to 80% of the time on it and spend the rest dipping into some of the older content stuff to try and diversify your offering and look out for potential other interesting markets that you can jump onto. Now, if you're someone who's not really too bothered about getting the Brutosaur and are much more interested in perhaps longer term gold making, then I do want to touch on some of the other major gold making approaches which are very viable, but which in my opinion require such a big investment in getting set up that you probably wouldn't be able to get there in time for January the 6th. Current content gear crafting can be extremely lucrative, but it's also very time consuming. Finding customers will require you to spam trade chat, and that will only net you a handful of customers a week. But those customers will often be happy to drop 10 to 30,000 gold to get their mythic level embellished items of gear. But that will require you to rank up your specializations in probably at least a few areas, and that's going to take quite a bit of time to do, even with the profession knowledge catch-up systems. And of course, if you pick the wrong market, then you're probably going to have a bit of a bad time. So this is potentially quite a risky strategy. Transfog is another favourite, especially for many of the really big gold makers out there. Rare transmogs sell for a lot of gold, well into 6 or 7 figures, but they sell extremely slowly, and the same is the case for pets. What this means is that to make reliable amounts of gold, you need to build up massive inventories, and that usually involves very lengthy farms or quite high risk auction house purchases, which may or may not yield what you need to make a go of it. In practice, this is a great way for very skilled gold makers to make it big over the very long term. But income is unreliable and variable, and that does make it, in my view, a very poor choice for a time-limited gold push like this one. And what about that old standby raw gold? Well, here the news really isn't so great. Sources of raw gold in the War Within are very limited compared to recent expansions. The days of a Dragon Soul raid netting you 2+ K are gone, quite sadly. The Shadowlands raids, which are now soloable, can yield about 1k for a mythic run, but that run is likely going to take you 60 to 90 minutes at the moment. And trust me, even mining in a new alt is going to make you more than 1k an hour. Raw gold sources are so sparse at the moment that I have a very strong suspicion that, as has happened with past expansions, Blizzard will end up adding some more raw gold sources in a later patch to try and inject gold into the economy. But the Brutosaur mount is going to be long gone before that happens. And finally, if you find that you cannot get the mount, don't despair. When I got the Battle for Azeroth Brutosaur, it was at the time quite transformative. Being able to access the auction house in Borealis and Ouroboros was a game changer for me. But ever since Dragonflight with an auction house in the main expansion hubs, I honestly rarely use it. The main use for it just now is on my old content mount farms when I use it just to clear out bags. And as for mailbox access, well, I've had Katie Stamp Whistle since, well, forever. Now, don't get me wrong, they are very useful when I do find that I want to use them, but the occasions when I do are very rare now, and the Brutosaur auction house mounts are far less valuable, in my opinion, than was the case back in Battle for Azeroth and Shadowlands days. And of course, while Blizzard may well be removing it on January the 6th, I personally think that there's no way that we won't see them bring this back, especially the next time Microsoft puts them under pressure to boost their quarterly revenue numbers. Anyways, that's my current pointers on how to get started in the world of gold making if you want to attempt to farm the mount in game. which means that it's time to hand over to all of you. Have you already got the mount? Are you working on it? What kind of gold have you been making? Let us know in the comments down below, along with any tips or advice you might have for folks trying to get started. Believe it or not, gold making can be a ton of fun in World of Warcraft. So even if you do end up getting the mount, consider not stopping there. I currently have just over 20 million gold on my account, so as you can imagine, I didn't have to wait to get the mount. Just be warned that gold making can be a bit addictive in World of Warcraft. Unlike gear, which usually gets replaced each patch, the gold that you amass is something you can carry on well into the future. While inflation in-game has been a thing in the past, the markets have been remarkably stable for quite a long time now, with 100 gold today being worth very much the same as it was back in Battle for Azeroth. If you found this video useful or just thought-provoking, then do let me know by hitting that like icon. And if you want to see more guides or news updates from me, then make sure to hit the subscribe button so that you get notified when they go live. I have a bunch of exciting new guides in the pipeline for you that will be launching real soon. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.